There were two women in the life of Aristotle Onassis. One he chose, one he loved. They were never the same woman. For 9 years, Maria Callas, the greatest soprano who ever lived, was the soul of Aristotle Onassis. She gave up her career for him. She gave up her marriage for him. She gave up, ultimately, everything for him. And then, one morning in October 1968, she opened a newspaper and read that Aristotle Onassis was marrying someone else. He had not called her. He had not warned her. He had not said goodbye. I'm Mary, and today we are going to talk about the man who had everything and the two women whose lives he changed forever. Because what happened between Aristotle Onassis, Maria Callas, and Jackie Kennedy is not a love story. It is a tragedy. And the other videos you have watched did not tell you the full truth. To understand this story, truly understand it, you need to know where these two people came from. Because Aristotle Onassis and Maria Callas were not simply famous people who fell in love. They were mirror images of each other. Two people who had built themselves from nothing. Two people who had suffered to reach the top. Two people who understood at the deepest level what the other had paid. Onassis, the refugee who built an empire. Aristotle Onassis was born on the 20th of January 1906 in Smyrna, a port city on the Aegean coast. His family was Greek. His father was a successful tobacco merchant. His childhood was comfortable, warm Mediterranean light, Orthodox churches, the smell of the sea. And then, when Aristotle was 16 years old, everything was taken away. In 1922, the Turkish army invaded Smyrna. The city burned. His family fled as refugees to Greece, strangers in their own ancestral country, starting from nothing. In 1923, Aristotle Onassis emigrated to Argentina with $60. That is all he had. He got a job working nights as a telephone operator, listening to business calls, using what he heard to build deals of his own during the day. By the age of 21, he was a millionaire. He bought ships during the Great Depression when everyone was selling. He built a supertanker fleet larger than the navies of many countries. He owned the Monte Carlo Casino. He owned Olympic Airways. He owned Scorpios, a private island in the Greek Aegean. He owned the legendary 325-foot yacht Christina O. From $60 to $1 billion, the most Greek story ever told. Maria, the voice that conquered the world. Maria Callas was born in New York in 1923 to Greek immigrant parents. Her childhood was the opposite of comfortable. Her parents' marriage was deeply unhappy. Her mother, obsessed with Maria's older sister Jackie, barely acknowledged Maria's existence. Maria was overweight, wore thick glasses, and felt invisible. But she had a voice that, when she opened her mouth, made everything else disappear. She moved to Greece at 13 to study. She practiced 8 to 10 hours a day. She sacrificed her teenage years, her social life, her entire identity to her craft. By the time she was in her mid-20s, she was the most celebrated soprano in the world. She sang at La Scala, at the Royal Opera House, at the Metropolitan Opera. She was on the cover of Time magazine. She was called La Divina, the Divine One. But underneath the legend, Maria Callas was a woman who had spent her entire life being unseen by her mother, by the world that reduced her to her voice. She had married Giovanni Meneghini, a wealthy Italian industrialist, 27 years, her senior who became her manager and protector. It was a safe marriage, a managed marriage, a marriage that kept her organized and protected and completely, utterly alone. And then, in the summer of 1957, at a party in Venice, she met him. The summer of 1959, Aristotle Onassis invited a group of the world's most famous people onto his yacht, Christina O, for a Mediterranean cruise. Winston Churchill was on board. Greta Garbo had been invited. And among the guests, Giovanni Meneghini and his wife, Maria Callas. What happened on that yacht over the following 2 weeks has been written about, analysed and debated for 60 years. But here is what every account agrees on. Aristotle Onassis and Maria Callas recognised each other instantly. Not as celebrities, not as famous Greeks, as people. As the only two people on that enormous glittering yacht who truly understood what the other had been through. His personal secretary, Kiki Moutsatsos, later said, "He couldn't live without Maria. Maria was a piece of his soul, of his body, of his brain." By the time the cruise ended, both marriages were over. Menechini and Athena Livanos, Onassis's first wife, both knew what had happened. The affair had begun in the open water of the Mediterranean, in full view of Winston Churchill. What Maria sacrificed. Here is what the other videos did not tell you. Maria Callas did not simply choose love over career. She did not gradually step back from singing while remaining the same person. What happened to Maria Callas after Onassis entered her life was a systematic, total destruction of everything she had built. Onassis did not want her on stage. He wanted her on his yacht. He wanted her at his dinners. He wanted her available, present, his. When she sang, she belonged to the world. When she was silent, she belonged only to him. He reportedly called her "my little songbird," a term that sounds affectionate until you understand what it meant. A songbird is kept in a cage. A songbird sings when its owner wants it to sing. A songbird does not tour the world. Between 1959 and 1965, Maria Callas's career effectively ended. The voice that had made her La Divina, the voice she had sacrificed her entire childhood to develop, fell silent. Performances were cancelled. Contracts were broken. The world's greatest opera houses waited for her to return. She did not return, because Aristotle Onassis had become her entire world, and she had let him. The pregnancy nobody talks about. In 1960, Maria Callas became pregnant with Onassis's child. The baby boy named Omero was born 3 months premature and lived only a few hours. Onassis did not publicly acknowledge the child. He did not stand beside Maria in the hospital. He did not grieve publicly. Maria grieved alone. She had given up her career. She had given up her marriage. She had given up her body. She had lost a child. And Onassis had given her what exactly? His presence. On his terms. In his world. On his yacht. In about 15 minutes, I am going to show you the moment that destroyed everything between them. The moment Aristotle Onassis made the worst decision of his life. And I want you to understand, truly understand what Maria Callas had already given up before that moment arrived. By 1968, something had changed between Maria and Onassis. 9 years had passed since the cruise on the Christina O. 9 years of the most passionate, destructive, all-consuming relationship either of them had ever known. 9 years of him choosing her, and then not quite choosing her, always on his terms. Always when it suited him. Always with the door slightly open to the rest of the world. Maria had waited. She had hoped. She had sacrificed. She had watched her career disappear while he continued to build his empire, take his meetings, charm the world. And then October 1968. Revelation 1, the newspaper. Maria Callas found out that Aristotle Onassis was marrying Jacqueline Kennedy from a newspaper. Not from a phone call, not from a letter, not from the man himself looking her in the eye and telling her the truth. She read it in the press, like a stranger, like everyone else. She had known something was happening. There had been rumors, but Onassis had reassured her. He had told her not to believe everything she read. He had essentially lied to her face until the moment the story broke publicly. When reporters reached Maria for a comment, she said only, "He's a man who is very much in love and very happy. That is a very nice thing." 6 words designed to protect her dignity. Behind them, everything. Revelation 2, why Jackie? This is the question that everyone asks. The man who had Maria Callas, why would he choose Jackie Kennedy? The answer is uncomfortable, but it is the truth. Aristotle Onassis, the refugee from Smyrna, the self-made man, the outsider who had spent his entire life proving himself to a world that had looked down on him, could not resist the ultimate status symbol, the widow of an American president, the most famous woman in the world. On his arm, on his island, it was vanity, pure, expensive vanity. Jackie had her own reasons. After watching her husband be assassinated, she was terrified. She wanted security. She wanted protection. She wanted a man powerful enough that the world would leave her alone. Before the wedding, a prenuptial agreement was negotiated through Ted Kennedy. Jackie would receive $3 million up front, $1 million for each of her children, $150,000 per year from his estate after his death. A transaction agreed upon before the wedding, before the vows, before the cameras and the white dress and the island. Revelation 3. He went back to Maria immediately. Here is what the other videos left out. Within weeks of marrying Jackie Kennedy, Aristotle Onassis was visiting Maria Callas in her Paris apartment 3 or 4 times a week. He had not chosen Jackie over Maria. He had tried to have both. He had tried to have the status of Jackie and the soul of Maria simultaneously. Jackie knew. His children Alexander and Christina knew. His staff knew. Everyone inside the story knew exactly what was happening. The marriage to Jackie was, from almost the first week, a public facade maintained by 2 people who needed it for entirely different reasons. Revelation 4, the daughter he ignored. And now something almost no one discusses. While Onassis was building his empire, marrying Jackie, maintaining his affair with Maria, his daughter Christina, was watching all of it. Christina Onassis, born in 1950, his only daughter, had grown up in the shadow of a father who loved his son Alexander completely and tolerated his daughter conditionally. She was overweight, intensely emotional, desperate for her father's approval. She hated Jackie with a fury she never attempted to hide. She called her stepmother the Black Widow. She refused to spend time with her. She watched her father replace her mother, humiliate Maria Callas, and install a famous stranger on the island that was supposed to be the family's home. Onassis had built his empire for his children, for the continuation of his name. But in building it, he had never truly seen the daughter who was standing right in front of him. January 23, 1973. Onassis's son, Alexander, 24 years old, was in a small plane accident at Athens airport. The injuries were catastrophic. He was kept on life support for several days. Onassis flew to Athens immediately. He called every doctor, every specialist, every expert money could reach. He was the richest man in the world, and he could do absolutely nothing. Alexander Diet, his personal secretary, said afterward, "After his son died, Mr. Onassis didn't want to live anymore. Everything he had built, the ships, the island, the businesses he had built for Alexander, for the continuation of the Onassis name, for the dynasty that would prove the refugee boy from Smyrna had created something permanent. Alexander was gone, and with him, the entire point of the empire. The Kennedy conspiracy, what nobody will say directly. And now something that other videos avoided entirely. For decades, a persistent rumor has circulated in certain circles that Aristotle Onassis had a connection to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963. Let me be clear. There is no verified evidence that Onassis was involved in Kennedy's assassination. No credible historian has established this. The Warren Commission did not implicate him. But here is what is factual and documented. Onassis had been investigated by Robert F. Kennedy, the president's brother and attorney general, for illegally registering his shipping fleet under foreign flags to avoid American taxes and regulations. The investigation was aggressive. Onassis despised the Kennedys. And then, 5 years after Kennedy was killed, Onassis married his widow. Whether that is coincidence, opportunism, or something darker, I leave that for you to consider. What I will tell you is this. The man who was investigated by Robert Kennedy, who had every reason to hate the Kennedy family, chose to marry the most famous Kennedy of all. And he did it in the most public way possible. Draw your own conclusions. The body fails. The divorce that never happened. After Alexander died, Onassis's body began to fail. He developed myasthenia gravis, a neuromuscular disease that progressively weakens the muscles. His eyelids drooped. He had to tape them open to see. By 1974, he had begun divorce proceedings against Jackie Kennedy. The marriage he had chosen over Maria, the transaction he had dressed up as love. He was going to end it. He never did. He ran out of time. The American Hospital of Paris. early 1975. Aristotle Onassis was dying. His body, which had carried him from Smyrna to Buenos Aires to the top of the world, was finally done. The myasthenia gravis had progressed. He could barely speak. He could barely breathe. Jackie Kennedy was in New York. Christina, his daughter, who had watched her father ignore her for years, who had never stopped loving him despite everything, was at his bedside. Maria's last visit. His personal secretary, Kiki Moutsatsos, arranged something extraordinary. She timed it carefully for when Jackie was in America and Christina was briefly away. Then she called Maria. Maria Callas came to the hospital through the back entrance. She walked through the service corridors. She entered his room quietly, without announcement, without cameras, without the world knowing. She knew he was dying. She had spoken to the doctors. There was no hope. She sat with him, in that hospital room in Paris, the two most famous Greeks in the world together one final time, behind a closed door, without witnesses. What they said to each other, no one knows. No account records it. No witness reported it. That conversation belongs entirely to them. When she left through the back entrance again. She returned to her Paris apartment 2 miles away. And she waited. The red blanket. In his hospital room on his bed, Aristotle Onassis had a red cashmere Hermès blanket. Maria had given it to him. He had brought it to the hospital. Of everything he could have taken, that is what he chose. The death and what followed. On the 15th of March 1975, Aristotle Onassis died at the American Hospital of Paris. He was 69 years old. Cause of death, respiratory failure. Jackie Kennedy flew in for the final hours. Christina, his daughter, had been at his side through most of it. And when it was over, she did 2 things. First, she settled Jackie's claim on the estate by offering her $26 million. When asked why so much, Onassis's closest associate said, "You would settle for $26, wouldn't you? Well, when you have an estate that large, $26 million is like $26. Second, she called Maria Callas. The daughter who had been ignored told the woman who had been betrayed, "He is gone." Maria Callas retreated entirely from the world after his death. She stopped performing. She stopped going out. She lived alone in her Paris apartment. On the 16th of September 1977, 2 years and 6 months after Onassis died, Maria Callas died of a heart attack in that same apartment. She was 53 years old. Her ashes were scattered off the coast of Scorpios, his island. After everything, after the betrayal and the backdoor hospital visits and the years of separation and the marriage to Jackie and the secret meetings and the broken promises in death, they are in the same water, on the same island, together. It is the most Greek ending imaginable. Before we close, I need to tell you about Christina, because her story is the one that nobody told you. And it is, in some ways, the most devastating chapter of this entire saga. Christina Onassis inherited everything. The empire her father had built, the ships, the island, the $1 billion. She inherited all of it at 24 years old, the same age her brother, Alexander, had been when he died. And she was completely, catastrophically unprepared for it. She married 4 times. Each marriage was a desperate search for the love and approval her father had never given her. Each one ended in failure. She struggled with her weight throughout her life, using amphetamines and extreme diets, in an endless battle that began because her father had once looked at her and said she was too fat. One sentence from a father who barely saw her. Decades of damage. In 1988, 13 years after her father died, Christina Onassis died suddenly in Argentina. She was 37 years old. The cause was pulmonary edema, complicated by years of extreme dieting and drug use. She was buried on Scorpios, next to her father, next to her brother. And Maria Callas's ashes were in the same water, surrounding the same island. 3 people destroyed in different ways, by the same man. A man who loved all of them and failed all of them. So what do we take from this story? Not the version you have seen before, the glamorous billionaire and his famous women. Not the tabloid version, the real one. Aristotle Onassis was a man of extraordinary capability and extraordinary blindness. He could see opportunity where no one else could. He could build something from nothing. He could charm presidents, and opera singers and kings. What he could not do was choose. He could not choose Maria over status. He could not choose his daughter over his son. He could not choose love over the performance of power. And everyone around him paid the price for his inability to choose. Maria Callas gave up her career, La Scala, the Met, everything she had spent her childhood building for a man who would not marry her. She died alone, 2 years after he did, her ashes scattered in his sea. Christina Onassis inherited an empire and spent the rest of her short life trying to fill the hole her father's neglect had carved in her. She died at 37. Jackie Kennedy, who had entered the story as the transaction, outlived all of them. She rebuilt her life in New York, worked as a book editor, raised her children, and died in 1994 at 64. Of everyone in this story, she may have been the most honest about what she was doing and why. And Onassis himself died in Paris, in a hospital, with a red blanket from the woman he had never stopped loving, and a wife who was in New York, and a daughter who had been at his bedside for weeks, largely unacknowledged. The most powerful man of his generation, surrounded by the evidence of every choice he had ever made. I keep coming back to one comment a viewer left on another video about Onassis. They wrote, "He never loved anyone except the thing he could never quite achieve." I have been thinking about that line for days, because I think it is almost right, but not entirely. I think he loved Maria. I think he loved Alexander. I think he even, in his way, loved Christina, though he never learned to show her. What he could never achieve was the ability to put love above ambition, to say, this is enough, this person, right here, this is enough. That, I think, is the real tragedy of Aristotle Onassis. Before you go, I want to ask you something. Maria or Jackie, which woman do you think Onassis truly loved? And do you think he ever truly loved anyone, or was love just another thing he tried to acquire? Leave your answer below. I read every single comment, and this is exactly the kind of question I want your perspective on. If this story moved you, please share it. Because Maria Callas gave up everything for a man who would not choose her, the least we can do is tell her story honestly. Next week, we follow the story to its final chapter. The daughter Onassis never truly saw. Christina Onassis, the woman who inherited $1 billion and spent her entire life trying to feel like she was enough. Subscribe so you do not miss it. This is Mary of Shadows. Thank you for being here.